Have you ever broken up with someone over their lack of hygiene? I remember the first time I noticed it. We were at the beach, the salty breeze tangling my hair as we strolled along the shoreline. His name was Alex, and we'd been dating for a few blissful months. You know how the start of a relationship can feel like you're walking on air. That's where we were. Everything was dreamy. His eyes sparkled with a kind of mischief that promised adventure. His laugh was this deep, infectious sound that could light up the dullest day. And he had this magnetic charm that drew people in. I felt like the luckiest girl in the world to be the center of his universe. That day at the beach, we were chasing seagulls and laughing about how we'd run away to some tropical island someday, living on coconuts and sunshine. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I caught a whiff of something off. At first, I brushed it aside. I mean, we'd been out in the sun all day, right? But as we cuddled up on the sand, I noticed it again. It was like a persistent, underlying smell that seemed out of place in the romantic, salty air of the beach. I didn't say anything then. It was too perfect a moment to spoil, and I didn't want to embarrass him or seem nitpicky. After all, everyone has their off days, but that little hint of something not quite right stuck with me, like a tiny pebble in my shoe that I couldn't shake out. Fast forward a few weeks, and we were deep into the rhythm of our relationship. We had our routines, Friday night dinners at the little Italian place around the corner, lazy Sunday mornings in bed, spontaneous road trips to nowhere. It was everything I had dreamed of and more. But that pebble had grown into a small stone. I started noticing little things more often. His hair, which had once been an endearing tousled mess, now seemed perpetually greasy. His clothes had a certain lived-in smell that didn't always seem appropriate for how often I'd seen him wear them. And the clutter in his apartment, oh, the clutter, seemed to multiply overnight. I still remember the first time I tried to bring it up. We were snuggled up on his couch, watching some silly rom-com that neither of us was really paying attention to. I took a deep breath and blurted out, "Hey, have you thought about, maybe, like, doing laundry more often?" It sounded awkward, even to me. His brow furrowed, and he looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. I fumbled for words, trying to tread carefully. "It's just, I've noticed that sometimes your clothes seem, well, they kind of smell like they've been worn a few times. And your hair, maybe it could use a wash more often." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the gears turning in his head. "I guess I just don't think about it," he said finally, shrugging. "I'm comfortable, you know." Comfortable. That word echoed in my mind for days. Comfortable was one thing, but this seemed like neglect. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't a big deal. Love conquers all, right? And I loved him. But the stone in my shoe was growing, and it was becoming harder to ignore. A few months later, things reached a tipping point. We had planned a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be this idyllic escape from the world, just the two of us, a roaring fireplace, and maybe a bottle of wine or two. I had packed all our favorite snacks, a stack of board games, and even a new sweater I'd bought just for the occasion. We arrived late on a Friday evening, the air crisp and filled with the scent of pine trees. The cabin was perfect, rustic but with all the modern comforts we could need. As we settled in, I noticed Alex had only brought a small duffel bag. He dumped it on the floor and pulled out a crumpled t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants that looked like they hadn't seen the inside of a washing machine in weeks. "Is that all you brought?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Yeah, it's just the weekend. I don't need much," he replied, pulling the t-shirt over his head. I watched in silent disbelief as he wore the same jeans he'd had on all day. By Saturday evening, the smell was undeniable. The cabin, which had seemed cozy and charming, now felt suffocating with the pungent mix of stale sweat and unwashed clothes. I couldn't take it anymore. As we sat by the fire, I took a deep breath and finally let it out. "Alex, we need to talk." He looked at me, puzzled. "What's up?" I shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of my words before I even spoke them. It's about your hygiene. I love you, but this is really bothering me. You don't seem to shower regularly, and your clothes. They smell. It's affecting how I feel about being close to you. His face fell, and for a moment, I wished I could take it all back. He looked hurt, and I hated myself for causing that. But then something changed in his expression. He didn't get defensive. Instead, he seemed thoughtful. I guess I didn't realize it was that bad, he said quietly. I've just never been the kind of guy who thinks about that stuff much. I always figured if it didn't bother me, it wouldn't bother anyone else. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I get that, but it does bother me. It's not just about the smell. It's about taking care of yourself, you know? He nodded slowly, looking into the fire. I'll try to be better about it, he said finally. I don't want this to come between us. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was it, the moment things would change. But the road ahead wasn't as smooth as I'd hoped. Over the next few months, Alex made some efforts to improve. He started showering more frequently, and I noticed him doing laundry a bit more often. But it was inconsistent. There would be good weeks where he seemed more attentive, and then there would be weeks where it felt like we were back to square one. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that habits don't change overnight. Our conversations about hygiene became more frequent and sometimes more heated. It wasn't just the physical discomfort anymore. It was starting to affect my attraction to him. I found myself pulling away when he leaned in for a kiss if I caught a whiff of unwashed hair or stale clothes. I felt guilty for feeling this way, but I couldn't help it. It was like my brain was wired to react negatively to the smell. I tried to approach it from different angles. I bought him a fancy grooming kit for his birthday, hoping it might inspire him. I suggested we make a routine out of doing laundry together. I even tried to frame it as a fun activity, like a mini spa day at home. Sometimes it worked, and he'd be enthusiastic about trying new things. Other times, he'd fall back into old patterns, and I'd feel that familiar frustration creeping in. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Alex sprawled on the couch, wearing the same sweatpants I'd seen him in for the past 3 days. The living room was a mess, with empty takeout containers and dirty dishes scattered around. I felt a wave of exhaustion and disappointment wash over me. Alex, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked up at me, sensing the seriousness in my tone. What's wrong? I sat down beside him, taking a deep breath. I'm struggling here. I've tried to be patient, but this is affecting us. It's affecting how I feel about being close to you. I can't keep doing this if things don't change. He looked hurt, and I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I don't mean to make things hard for you. I guess I get lazy. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It is a big deal, I replied, feeling the weight of my words. It's about more than just hygiene. It's about taking care of yourself and respecting the people around you. I need to know that you're willing to make an effort, not just for me, but for yourself too. There was a long silence as he absorbed what I was saying. Finally, he nodded. Okay, I get it. I'll try harder, I promise. I wanted to believe him, but a part of me was still skeptical. I had heard similar promises before, and while there had been moments of improvement, the underlying issue remained. I realized then that this wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about compatibility and values. Could I see myself with someone who didn't prioritize basic self-care? The weeks that followed were a roller coaster. There were days when Alex seemed genuinely committed to changing. He'd shower, wear fresh clothes, and even take out the trash without being asked. I'd catch glimpses of the man I'd fallen in love with, and my heart would swell with hope. But then there were the days when he'd slip back into old habits, and I'd feel that familiar knot of frustration tightening in my chest. Our relationship became a series of ups and downs, moments of closeness followed by periods of distance. I found myself questioning everything: my feelings for him, our future together, my own tolerance levels. It was exhausting. and I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to find the right balance between expressing my needs and not pushing him away. One evening, as we sat on his balcony watching the sunset, Alex turned to me with a serious look on his face. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began. "I know I haven't been the best at taking care of myself, and I'm really sorry for how that's affected us. I want to be better for you, for us." I squeezed his hand, feeling a glimmer of hope. "I appreciate that, Alex, I really do. But it has to come from you. I can't make you change. It has to be something you want for yourself." He nodded, looking down at our intertwined hands. "I know. And I do want to change. I've started seeing a therapist to help me figure out why I've been neglecting myself. I think it's more than just laziness. I need to understand it and work on it." My heart skipped a beat. This was the first time he'd mentioned therapy, and it felt like a huge step forward. "That's amazing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. "I'm really proud of you." As the weeks turned into months, I saw real progress. Alex was more attentive to his hygiene, and our home life became more harmonious. There were still moments of struggle, but they were fewer and further between. We communicated more openly, and I felt like we were finally on the same page. Looking back, I realized that our journey had taught me a lot about patience, communication, and the complexities of love. It wasn't just about hygiene or personal care. It was about understanding each other's needs and working together to overcome challenges. We both grew in ways we hadn't anticipated, and our relationship became stronger for it. Today, Alex and I are in a much better place. We've learned to navigate our differences and support each other in ways that matter. It wasn't an easy road, and there were times when I wondered if we'd make it. But in the end, we found our way through, and I wouldn't trade our journey for anything. In the grand tapestry of life, sometimes it's the small stones that shape us the most. They may be uncomfortable and hard to bear, but they also teach us resilience, understanding, and the true meaning of love. And as I look at Alex now, with his freshly washed hair and that familiar twinkle in his eye, I know that we've come a long way together.